There you go.
Okay, so basically, there were two plans for presidential reconstruction. Lincoln's plan.
Don't look at the screen, remember.
Yeah. Yeah, the first one being Lincoln's plan, and what he wanted to do, he wanted a quick and painless reconstruction. So he treated the states as if they had never really left the Union, instead of the radical Republicans that wanted to treat them as conquered provinces. So basically what Lincoln did was he issued the Proclamation of Amnesty and Reconstruction in 1863, and this was his policy of dealing with the South. So basically what this proclamation said was that Southerners could be pardoned, reinstated as U.S. citizens if they took an oath of allegiance to the Constitution and the Union and pledged to abide by emancipation. So basically you just had to say that you were faithful to the Constitution and that you wanted slavery to be abolished. And this proclamation was eventually called the 10% Plan, because once 10% of the voting population in any state had taken this oath, they'd be admitted back into the Union.
Johnson's plan was very much like Lincoln's. He sided with Lincoln in the sense that he wanted a quick and painless fix to the Union. He was slightly stricter towards the South, but still overall with Lincoln. And Johnson's plan was based off of it consisted off of 5 major parts. Instead of 10% of each state having to take the oath before getting its rights back, he wanted 50%. All Confederate leaders had to give a personal apology to Johnson. All states had to ratify the 13th Amendment that outlawed slavery. All states had to repeal their ordinances of secession. And lastly, no pardons were to be granted for Confederates with taxable property exceeding $20,000. And he let these people petition for their pardons. Johnson used Reconstruction in North Carolina as a template for the other states. He assigned provisional governors to the states until the necessary amount of oaths were taken and the 13th Amendment was passed. And he eventually ended up granting more than 13,000 pardons for the wealthy Southerners that had been petitioned for their rights.
I'm going to say with the Freedmen Bureau, and the Congress passed the Confiscation Act of 1862.
Can't hear you.
Which it declared all the slaves that took refuge with the Union and joined the army were to be set free. And this paved the way for the Emancipation Proclamation, and it also helps with the Union's army strategy.
I could not, it's okay, you can choose to communicate, I can't hear you, so that's fine.
Should I repeat it?
No.
Or I could.
Wrong time.
So, like, the Confiscation Act and, like, the emancipation of slaves was going on, like, during the Civil War. And, like, so basically, you had all of these slaves, like, fleeing to Union lines. And, like, they were fleeing to the military for, like, care and support. But, like, this was the military, so they weren't, like, trained in that area. So, like, they didn't really know how to provide for these people. And so, like, during the war, and, like, during the Reconstruction, they realized that something needed to be done in order to get the freedmen proper care and support. And so, like, a committee, I think, from the War Department met, and they decided that they would come up with a temporary organization that would, like, last for 1 year, that would provide the freedmen with, like, resources to make themselves more self-reliant and be able to work and provide for themselves. And so they came up with the Freedmen's Bureau, and, like, the full name for it is the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands. And this, for the most part, helped freedmen, but it was also for those white people, like white refugees who were left destitute after the war. And so it helped them, it helped the whites regain citizenship so that they could take back all any confiscated land. idea was actually like at the same time to use the confiscated land, like to give some of it to the freedmen so that they could start farming on like a subsistence level. And then there were some other objectives too. They wanted to increase and improve medical services given to the freedmen, and they wanted to give them education, and also at the same time they wanted to keep the freedmen working on plantations so that like they would still be cheap labor for like plantations and stuff. Education was the most successful, and the Freedmen's Bureau worked with charitable organizations to build colleges that would teach African Americans, and then they would become teachers and be able to teach their students.
Okay, congressional reconstruction was also known as radical reconstruction, and since like the majority of the people on Congress were Republican, they were unwilling to give the Southern members their seats back and get back their power. And the Congress also believed that by seceding, the southern states had lost all of their political and civil rights under the Constitution.
While Congress was dominated by Northerners who did not believe in slavery, they passed the Radical Civil Rights Act of 1875 and 1866. These meant that blacks could not be discriminated against because of their race in theaters, public conveyances, restaurants, inns, jury selection. This was a very radical idea at the time because it means that blacks are equal to whites.
There were no Southerners in Congress from 1861 to 1865, which meant that all the acts that took place in Congress at that time favored the North.
Yes. Also, the North was a